All right, we're ready for the next phase of adding handles. We used an extruder to create the coil, which made a really nice, even piece of clay that can be used for the handle. It has had some time to air dry, and now we're ready to add it to the mug. Before I add it to the mug, I'm just going to kind of go around and see where on my mug it's going to look best. One thing to avoid when adding handles to a mug. One mistake that I have seen are mugs that have handles that go above this rim right here. If your handle goes above that rim, it looks very unnatural and it's just an unpleasant finish. I want you to try to use the advice to keep your handle from going above that top rim. I like to attach my handles just a little bit lower than the rim there. And I also attach them near the bottom, but not all the way at the bottom. So as I'm holding this on here, I can see I need to make a few cuts on here to kind of perfect it a little bit better. And then I'll finish reshaping it. Right now I have a handle that should fit about 4 fingers of typical hand size. Maybe 3 fingers for a larger hand, but it should be a pleasant feel for when they want to hold the mug. I'm ready to attach my handle with a few minor fixes. I had a little extra clay at the bottom. I'm going to clean that off. And then, of course, I'm going to use a needle tool, and I'm going to score the edges here. Rough them up. Now, while I'm adding my handle to the mug, it may lose its shape a little bit. I might get some fingerprints on there, and I will make sure that I clean that up later on. I like the placement and the size, so I'm ready to go ahead and add it. I'm going to go ahead and score the areas where it's going to be added. Another big problem I have seen is people that are adding a handle accidentally add it crooked. So what I'm referring to is I know I have this in a pretty much of a straight line, but what I've had is students that have added, say, a mug handle over to this side and up here at the top, so it's off center. That's definitely noticeable. I'll show you some other tricks to make sure you don't make that mistake. All right, I'm ready to add some slip. In my slip container, it's not too terribly wet, but just the right consistency. It is not quite like a glue. I want to say it's a little bit more firm than glue. I'm going to use a paintbrush to go ahead and add that on. If I want it to be a little bit more liquidy, just add a little extra water to your slip. But I find this is a really good amount. I am going to go ahead and add just a little bit to my handle as well. Or what I've seen some ceramic artists do is just kind of wet the edges of the handle that they're adding. All right, so now I'm going to attach my handle at the top and at the bottom. Notice how the slip kind of squeezed out a little bit. No problem. In fact, you want that to happen. All right, so I'm going to tilt my mug up, and I'm going to look at it from all different angles. When I look at it right now, it is actually off center. Another way to be able to see that from where you're sitting is I'm going to hold the cup at an angle so you guys can see. Is it perfectly straight up and down? Gosh, it looks like it, but it actually isn't. When I sit here and I look at it from top to bottom, that's where I'm looking down inside the mug. That's when I can really see the difference. All right, so I have attached my handle. There's some imperfections in there. I'm going to perfect those a little bit. One of the tools that I use, and there's lots of different ways that people do this, I like to use my needle tool and my paintbrush. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to smooth out that seam. When I say seam, I'm referring to the area where the handle meets the cup. There's going to be a little bit of a little bit of a gap. There's also that extra amount of slip that has kind of squeezed out, and I'm going to smooth that out. not just from the top, but also from underneath. And this is also called cleaning it up. I'm making sure my seams look nice. And that way you're able to also ensure that it's attached really good. As I've mentioned before, you do not want to pick up your mug by this handle until it has been fired, or it will absolutely fall off. So in this case, now what I'm doing is I'm going to work on this bottom piece here. And I'll turn this to the side so you guys can see. There are some details to clean up. What I want to do is, again, on the bottom, I am going to clean up that seam. And that's also further solidifying that joint where I put those two pieces of clay together. I want to make sure they stick really good. And that needle tool will get in there really well. If you try to do this with your fingers will not fit into that tight space easily without distorting your handle. So again, I'm just going to use my needle tool. I'm going to further smooth it out. And I'm going to do that from the sides and from the bottom and on top. Sometimes you accidentally pull away clay when you are cleaning up those seams. You might have noticed when I'm pulling clay up over that seam, I have extra clay on my needle tool. I take that right off of my needle tool and put it back onto my mug. And that just kind of gave me a little extra clay in that area so I can smooth it out. Now I'm going to teach you a trick that I have that not all ceramic artists use. Let me set my mug back just a bit. What I want to do now is I want to further clean up my mug. The handles on my mug right now. First things first, as soon as I moved my mug, my handle kind of slipped down and was touching the table. I don't want that to happen. So you may end up having to support it with something. So in this case, I'm just going to support it a little bit with an extra lid. You can use another piece of clay. Doesn't matter what you use. What I'm doing is preventing it from sliding down. All right, now I'm going to clean up my paintbrush with a little water. And my paintbrush is not dripping wet, but I'm just going to kind of go over that seam just a little bit and clean up any clay crumbles. I can't emphasize enough, I'm using a very small amount of water. I'm not spraying it with a spray bottle. I'm just very lightly going over any imperfections with a wet paintbrush. The purpose is not necessarily to wet it, but to smooth it out a bit. So if you have imperfections, and you will, you want to go ahead and perfect that at this stage before it gets too dry. All right, so now I have a nice handle added to my mug, and it is going to fit either a male or female hand and should stay nice and solid after it has been fired. So that completes our demonstration.